Welcome everybody to the Metaverse class. Great to see a classroom full of enthusiastic students. So we're all delighted to bring this to you this year. This class came about really, it was last summer, I think. Valentin Nguyen is an old friend, colleague in the Media Lab, did his master's in fluid interfaces with Patty MAS. And since that lab is right next to mine, I talk a lot with Valentin. We did a lot of work and you'll see in a moment, the second half of the lecture, I'll talk about the stuff that we did in this space. We played a lot with how metaverse concepts and virtual worlds meet Internet of Things. And he was working on that from a different viewpoint, how to basically spatially control different devices and things like that. So Valentin dropped by or sent me an email first, Joe, let's teach a metaverse class. You know, it's the topic of the day.
Think about a hypothetical.
Yeah. Well, we've always, in this building, we put metaverse in quotes. I was going to do it almost in the class title. We actually called it Xverse for a while, we probably still do, because it means many, many things. We're going to drill down to that in our talk. That's the beauty of this word. It doesn't really mean anything by itself. You know, it has some connotation, but what it really is still yet to be fleshed out. And there's so many interesting pieces to it. And I think you're going to see a lot of that, certainly through the course of our lectures, but through the whole term. I said, yeah. And actually, even before that, Hiroshi, me, and Patty MAS would do panels here at the Media Lab on Metaverse.
Yes.
Hiroshi's been working at this real virtual intersection ever since he began. They'll tell you about that. And you know, there are even things in his lab I forgot about, like the augmented reality iPads. I mean, this was great pioneering work. It was done many, many years ago. I think in the 2000 era. Yeah. So yeah, we've all dabbled in it. We've all played in this in different ways, and now that it's a catch-all phrase, the lab starts to circle its forces and really start to define what we mean by this word and what's exciting about it from a research viewpoint. So it was great timing for Valentin, and I couldn't say no. Started banding around the syllabus back and forth, you know, like a month here, a month there, started to touch out the class. And then I was talking to Hiroshi after a faculty meeting about, you know, what we're teaching, and he just lit up with the idea of metaverse. So we came up with this idea of all being together in the force. Valentin and I have a strong syllabus that we refined a lot with our colleagues for the lectures, and you know, Hiroshi and Daniel and Kathy are going to be running the recitation sessions for projects we're running. Anyway, maybe you should go to the next slide as we talk about that. So welcome. There's a website, metaverse.media.mit.edu. That's the outgoing public website that everything's posted on. Down there, but anyway. Class meets here. The recitation sections are Friday from 2 to 3:30, so hour and a half. And that's where we're going to be. You'll be learning particular skills related to things you may want to do in projects. You'll hear more about that here. And start to develop your projects with Hiroshi and TAs. This is us, but let's go to the very talented TAs that we're fortunate to have. So Daniel and Kathy, why don't you introduce yourselves? I think you have a little slide deck at some point, right?
Later on.
Okay.
Yes. I am Daniel, call me D. Pillis. I'm in the Media Lab with Hiroshi and excited to be a part of the class.
Great, Kathy, same thing with Daniel, we're excited to be part of the class.
Yeah. And we're so privileged to have both of these guys, because not only are they great people doing HCI and Hiroshi's group, which is always amazing work in this area that crosses boundaries, but Daniel worked with Ivan Sutherland, the granddaddy of VR with an AR. You know, so you know, he came from Ivan basically to join Hiroshi's group. And Kathy worked with Chris Harrison and others at CMU doing actually a lot of augmented reality stuff. So we'll hear a little bit about that.
Well, that's.
Go ahead.
So, well, I was just going to give a little overview for conversational purposes and break some ice around immersive media and its history. So I wanted to just kind of look at, and as a panel, we can also discuss if anyone has thoughts about the impact of these different technologies. So immersive media and the metaverse have a long history. We all know that by now. It's not as new as it would seem. Importantly, in early iterations, panoramas, immersive paintings, the feeling of auto-tour or tropical, where you see a painting that imitated sculpture or imitated life in some way, where it was attempting to extrude into real space, was really the kind of early iterations of this medium, this technology. It wasn't until photography was enabled that we have the ability to do things like stereoscopic imagery, which became the first kind of three-dimensional experience you would use in things like stereoscopes, which I'm sure you've all played with, which fundamentally have the same technical properties as what we now know to be a VR headset. So there's a number of different iterations that were really significant, the Wheatstone and Brewster, and then of course, eventually we have cinema, the moving image, which really changed everything. And a lot of that owes its heritage to Muybridge, understanding the human body and movement and how you can use photography to document different stages of motion. So in recent history, we have technology like the Viewmaster, which is a modern version of the stereoscope, and then the golden era of 3D cinema in the 1950s and 60s. It's not until in the last century and in the 1950s and 60s that we really get to the interactive experience, which really defines our understanding of contemporary immersive media. So the interactive component, of course, relies on the invention and birth of the modern computer. So one of the non-necessarily fully interactive mediums called the Sensorama is often credited as one of the first immersive media experiences. I think it's interesting because it allowed for multi-sensory, like what we now look at haptic relationships to kind of achieve, allowing you to feel wind, smell, vibrations, and 3D cinema, 3D scenery in a kind of kiosk mode. It did not necessarily use a head-mounted display, but it was a head-mounted experience. So as Joe pointed out, I was lucky when I was at Carnegie Mellon, same school as Kathy prior to here. I worked with a person named Ivan Sutherland, and you can see here, this was an image I found in the archives of the university, actually, that hadn't been published at the time, of Ivan when he was an undergrad, and I found it just really charged and a really powerful image. The Machina Versatilis, which was a small robot he made, which could find, it could actually follow lights in a darkened room. So this was undergraduate work, and then that he on his own, without any prompting from me whatsoever, when I showed him this picture, took this picture of himself in his house with the robot now, which still exists perfectly, which I found really special to see how an object like that can survive over time. Someone's robot really becoming something human to them. So Ivan, if you're not familiar, that's more about the Machina Versatilis. So his whole story is really beautiful, and we can talk about it if you have any more questions. His brother Bert and him were able to work with Edmund Berkeley, who is the founder of the ACM. As high school students, they were basically encouraged. If you've been to the MIT Museum, there was Claude Shannon's maze for a mechanical rat. And at the time, that was like a challenge to make a mechanical rat that could find cheese in a maze. And when they were high school students, Bert and Ivan were challenged with that concept of making a rat that could, they called it Franken, a mechanical rat. Of course, he's known most significantly for what he did at MIT. So at Carnegie Mellon, he was doing early experiments with robotics, and at MIT, he created what is called Sketchpad. This is his thesis from 1963 at the Lincoln Laboratory. His advisors, Claude Shannon, a number of other luminaries from our institute were instrumental in developing this. It was on TXO, a computer at the time. It was one of the few that had a light pen. So I'll just jump through to the real achievements for Sketchpad was it was the first graphical user interface that allowed you to modify, create, and apply rules to geometric drawings. So this was what many consider to be the birth of computer graphics as a field. So Ivan went on later to do some instrumental teaching at the University of Utah. He was part of a generation of people who taught people who founded Adobe and Autodesk and Pixar, all of the kind of modern computer graphics movement, things that you are now know today and take for granted. What I want to talk most importantly about now is how VR came about. So does anyone here have any idea why I would be showing a helicopter when we're talking about VR?
I was wondering.
You were. And were you wondering why the helicopter had Santa Claus in it?
That is what?
Santa Claus.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's Santa Claus. So It's a story that I don't know if it's really well written, but basically, Ivan was working at Bell Helicopter, and the goal of the project was to create a head-mounted display that allowed the helicopter to land at night. And the challenge there was basically what we now take for granted in a car that allows you to get a rear view live video feed of what's going on behind you. But Bell Helicopter was using a head-mounted display, which at the time was two slivered reflective images that would take a video feed and allow you to see some variation of it overlaid in visor. So when they were doing the head-mounted display for the helicopter, they had an incident where they were doing research on one floor where the other floor someone was playing a baseball on the roof of the building. And Ivan was in the room with the head-mounted display trying to understand how it worked, and they had the camera mounted on the roof. When the person playing baseball threw the ball and it nearly hit the camera, Ivan ducked in the laboratory. This gave way to their understanding of physical presence and how a virtual experience can actually make you feel like you're in a real experience. So ducking to not be hit by the baseball was that moment of, wow, something that is virtual can really drive cognitive and physical experiences. So importantly, they, at the time, because of Ivan's work in graphics, they were able to connect a computer display to the head-mounted display, which resulted in what is considered the Sword of Damocles, the first head-mounted augmented reality display. So this is in 1966, and this was after the research at Bell Helicopter. They actually did this down the street at Harvard. So this is what is considered to be the first VR headset, in that it is a head-mounted display that allows for interactive computer graphics, but it's more like augmented reality. Does anyone know why the Sword of Damocles used as the title for this? It's another one of those really great intellectual jokes. So in Greek myth, Damocles was wanted to be king for a day, and the king Damocles was not the king. I'm sorry, Damocles was the king. A servant wanted to be king, and the king Damocles said, "Well, if you want to be king, you can do so, but you have to sit in my throne with a sword dangling above your head." With the idea that with great power comes great responsibility, all Star Wars slogans and whatnot. So, but it actually, I think, is a really nice moment in VR history to think about what they were, the kind of larger spectrum of responsibility that comes with technology, and how important it is to be sensitive to that. So on the right here is the first VR room. It was just the coordinates of the space, northwest, east, and south on this grid, on this square. So that was that. So this is the Sword of Damocles here. Now, another just tidbit: the Sword of Damocles is not actually the HMD. It's technically the wiring and contraption that held it, as in the sword. But it's called head-mounted display, first head-mounted display, 1968. It's at the Harvard Museum. It's in their collections there. No, actually, it was made at Harvard. Now it's at the Computer History Museum. So yeah, this is stuff I was talking about at the University of Utah. They were learning how to make computer graphics by drawing on Ivan's VW Beetle and then generating them as 3D models. And then this is me and Ivan. This is the project that we did back when VR was booming. This is Ivan's ex-wife on the Oculus DK2. And basically, it was a creative project exploring Ivan's work and history through VR as a kind of way for him in his, at this point in his life, to view his work and history in this interactive modern technology. So this exhibit told the story. It had his MIT thesis there. And he notably, the other thing I want to add on this is that at the time he was working at CMU, after all this work in the VR and computer graphics, he was working on legged robotics. And a colleague of his, Mark Raber, was inspired by his work on dynamically balanced legged robotics. And if you're familiar, Mark Raber then went on to found Boston Dynamics. So basically, Boston Dynamics, in a way, was influenced. This is the work that the Leg Laboratory was doing. If you're familiar, the Leg Laboratory was first at CMU and then moved to MIT, and then Boston Dynamics came out of it, which I'm sure you're familiar with the company now. And this is, of course, how the exhibit ended with the first printing of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Little Bella. So yeah, I just wanted to end this by bumping through, 1980s and 90s. There's technology that attempts to commercialize virtual reality in the form of the Virtual Boy, VR arcades. And I'm sure you're familiar with the CAVE system, which is a really influential immersive projection VR system. And we can maybe look at some of these if we have more time today in the class, if anyone wants to keep talking about these links. And then we are excited. Joe might want to mention this later, but we will have a special guest coming to visit this semester, which is really amazing. And in the present, we are now in the era, this is of course MIT, right outside our building, which is a really important, amazing image of Steve Mann, the father of wearable computing. And this is, the text directly from his website as to how to repurpose this image or use it. I found it really interesting. I like to look at the way that, modern VR is advertised with this image compared to the reality of like how wearables were initially kind of seen as maybe not as socially acceptable, and how like a lot of driving forces is making it more, it's about making it fashionable. So moving to the present, 2011 is when the Oculus prototype hits. It's acquired after a $2.4 million Kickstarter, a $2 billion acquisition by Facebook in 2014. And then, Palmer Luckey, you probably are familiar, gets kind of nixed from it. But between 2016 and the present, we've had significant changes in VR where, originally you needed graphics desktop, optical tracking, room scale environments. Now we have compact portable VR, which we'll be using in this class. We'll also use tracking in the recitation and in class in general, but now everything is inside out, so you don't need any trackers. You just have the headset. It's all untethered, self-contained in one device. So yeah, that just gives me, thank you for giving me a chance to go through a little bit of the early history. I hope that was helpful. And we can touch on things maybe if we have time to talk more about those early and important works later on.
Yeah, just a short introduction about myself. Okay, I have a, yes, right. I've been doing research in human-computer interactions or computer-mediated human-human interaction in the past 30 years. Next. So for me, most interesting application is expressions. As an artist, painters, sculptor, also calligrapher, always I really care about the tools, the medium to externalize my idea so that other people can also appreciate, share, or collaborate. These examples, some of you may know that airbrush, Kimiko Ryokai invented, she's a professor in UC Berkeley, became quite an important step to give a joy to become a painters, but also color makers. You can make a pigment from a real physical world. Then right side, you see the soundscape. This is the Arceltonica. We invented it 20 years ago, but we created the modern version for MIT Museum, which just opened this year or last fall. Yeah, so you can really see, but the sound become a sculpting media, other analog media, but also scanning the geometry constantly, then projection mapping. You can project analysis, like a control line, water drainage, and many other aspects. So these are kind of examples how you can combine digital analysis and the form giving using your hands. So next. So I think there's an interesting pendulum moving between what the real and the physical. Being digital, because Fountain's book maybe made one of the biggest impact to really make people understand how digital is superior to other. He hated the past. He really tried to do everything digital. And also he coined a very powerful metaphor, bits and atoms. That's really gave an amazing framework. But I joined 2 years later. Then I made another movement called being tangible. So I believe that the tangibility is something fundamentally important because of physical beings, and we really appreciate all the physical stuff like this one. What's the most important things? If I'm thirsty, I can drink this water to the body. That's a reality. So even photorealistic rendering, virtual stuff has power, but also limitation. Like how to bring tangibility. More importantly, how to make digital tangible is my past quarter century research. And I often use a metaphor, the battle against pixel empire. But actually, metaverse is a real Darth Vader of the metaverse. The pixelated fire. It's kind of exciting to think about what we can do. So you can see metaverse is so hot since maybe Facebook changed the name, making very amazing videos. But metaverse is like a counter flag I'm not using. This is a flag that the Puzzle X, this is a lady called Gina. She's an amazing visionary that did this event 2 years ago in Barcelona. I was invited last November. Then the thing is metaverse. So we are made of the atoms and molecules. Then how to really bring back the computation and the physical world. So still very conceptual, but the universe made of the matter, something very interesting. And I'd like to really explore how metaverse could be core part of the metaverse, but the metaverse also have to include all the messy clay, sand, our body, also all the IoT stuff. So I'd like to really pursue that direction. And what is metaverse? And as already Joe said, so many, that concept is very old. Cyberspace and metaverse. So basically it's a yesterday's tomorrow. And but it's nice to catch you up. But I think a bit of the naive idealization that assumptions completely 3D rendered 3D space is better than those kind of space. And also become seamless integration of so many other stuff, also very natural interaction. So those are questions I'm thinking in the past 2 years. So I think it's natural. And of course, we know what means natural, using all the non-verbal cue like a gaze or gesture or physical distance. Also symmetry, because if I want to talk to you and come closer, you can negotiate the space, what the comfortable distance. But the Zoom, you have nowhere. So I think we're using a lot of subtle cue for make natural interaction. Can we do it in a digital world? Of course, the obvious limitation. Also, seamless convergence is another important thing because the metaverse claim interoperability. But the interoperability is also kind of illusion because the world is balkanized by strong platformers. Also, each app, each application, even USB-C doesn't talk to USB 2.0. So full of the incompatibility. So that seems discontinuous, inevitable. So in that world, how can we make a seamless convergence? And that's a big question. And but maybe synthetic cells, avatar, there's the most important question. As I mentioned, realistic and believable. So I think spring we had a member meeting and have a pleasure to having a session with Joe. And I think he was an expert. That's something that he coined and the crossbar. Also Patty Mays, also Pat joined. We had quite an interesting discussion, but metaphorically, for me, we are still something like deep sea divers because to go to the virtual world, you have to really shut off your eyes and ears. Then you have to replace all this like organ into different pieces. And also, if you want to live into the space, you definitely need a battery, Wi-Fi connection, for example. And so this right side is another painting by Spanish painters, which I really like it. So strollers along the seashore, those are deep sea divers. So that's my belief in the past 30 years, that walking the seashore, enjoying the breeze from sea, and also seeing the gaze and eyes of my loved one. So he painted his wife and the daughters, also picking up a beautiful seashells, then bring back to Slovenia. So that's the work. I like it. That's the reason I'm being tangible. Instead of going to a pure deep sea, try to bring a computation bits into physical stuff. So, and also interesting back to who we are human beings. This is like a metaphorical, but you can go deep, quite deep. But how long can you hold the breeze? If you're aware, you can breathe, you can survive 2 hours, but a human being usually 2 minutes. So it heavily depends on this technology. Makes quite a situation very tricky. But also there are a lot of the passion, and it's exciting to see the evolution. So many people putting so much energy for HMD, but in that, all the haptic sensation, because everybody said you have to do haptics. because VR does not provide tactile sensation, then making so many wearables for special purpose. That is kind of very interesting because now haptic community is so energized because we are at the metaverse, but I'm not sure we want to wear all this stuff in the whole body to simulate, then put on and put off. But also haptic is so specialized for tactile sensation. So do you want to replace all the stuff for each application? So those kind of the metaphorical questions. So what is the word I really want to see? I saw two examples. Left is immersive aquarium. This aquarium is so powerful, so beautiful because first, these are real, but also separate. You do not need a diving suits because you know physical space, so you can talk with your kids having eyes. Another impressive experience I had is the immersive Frida Kahlo, or immersive Bangkok, or immersive Klimt. Have any of you went to those art exhibitions? There's so many things you can learn about what means immersion, what the story, narrative, telling. So without those powerful contents, diving into this world doesn't make sense. But still, this immersive exhibition, which allow me to talk to my students. I brought a bunch of students who were there, and we learned a lot about what means immersive 3D space. Okay. Anyway, if you took my class, tangible space, Paul, some of you were there, but I've been doing a lot of the effort how to bring computation into physical world, graspable object or manipulative object or environment. So that might be the counter position from a metaverse point of view. But I think juxtaposing those different views may help to understand what means being digital or being tangible. That's it. Okay, thank you.
Let me try to share my screen because I made some slight changes to the sheet. Hey, so my regular job is I'm a vice president for innovation engineering at a company called PTC. PTC invented parametric design tools, tools that you build rockets with. The rocket that NASA just sent to the moon was entirely managed in the software from PTC and constructed. Yes. So we have CAD software that is traditional, also in the cloud, on shape. We have product lifecycle management. We're the market leader in product lifecycle management, and this part of the rocket was also product lifecycle managed with our tool. We are a market leader in IoT, industrial IoT. And so with all of these technologies, our CEO was like, we know the thing, we know how it's produced, all the pieces of it, and how it's operated with the IoT and so on. So there's so much data, and the channel we have is only through a straw, and we need to find a better way to make the data visible. So that's how we ventured into augmented reality. It's a big bet into it 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We bought Warrior from Qualcomm at the time, and it's a big business. We're one of the strongest businesses in the industry, actually being profitable with it. And yeah, so 5 years ago, when I finished here in the Media Lab as a PhD, and we were wondering, should we start a business? Our CEO invited me on and said, hold on that idea. How about you start a lab and provide what you want to do? Okay. So this is my lab, background. And it's in Seaport, and we can invite you over and show you around over there. A little bit about what I've been up to the last 10 years. It's pretty much 10 years now. So 2013 in Ati's group, and this Shunichi that was visiting Hiroshi's group, we started the reality editor, a tool to understand and control the physical world around you, because we realized that everything becomes more connected and IoT connected, and it becomes more and more difficult how to control and manage these things. Maybe not so much in the phone. We'll put like apps that you can control heating and so on. But in the industry, it starts to become really, really difficult because the granularity of spatial connected things, motor sensors and so on, is just unbelievably complex. And so after all the time in the media lab being more in the consumer perspective, when I was sitting in front of Jim Happelman, our CEO, I was like, I think industry will be the place to experiment. And so, yeah, so we started the reality editor, and as a consequence of that, 2017, we named that lab a PTC Reality Lab. And then other companies with more marketing budget funded. And you see here like a nice reporting from my team at the time. So pretty much everything I show you, I haven't done myself. I'm kind of taking the torch and running the front and tell everyone a good story of where we should go. But the real magic is there's a fantastic team behind all of that. Actually, the two first bureaus that I ever worked with, they're now in my team and running the show, so to say. So the team has a big history altogether. And what you see, like we do a lot of experiments. We started with augmented reality, and we had the idea of actually using augmented reality not to just overlay information, but actually reprogram the physical world. So because we realized the augmented reality is not the thing that you always work through, so it makes no sense to have the identity of an object entirely in augmented reality. But if you can use augmented reality to set up the functionality of an object, to change its essence, and then you continue in the physical world, that's the perfect combination, and that's how we envision the reality editor. And so we pushed this idea forward. It was really 2013. We started with it. A few years later, we open sourced it, and we started Reality Lab. We branched off internally, and then 2020 we re-released what we have built on top of the Reality Editor as a spatial toolbox open source software. And you see here some experiments of that. We run robots with this software. We build massive collaborative spaces. And 2022, we had some breakthrough in what we call spatial multitasking, the ability to run completely sandbox applications in space in a shared environment. A concept of an application that is just not present in any operation system out there, and we make good use of it in PTC. And so we started in endeavor into the metaverse, and that's how we come into that all of that. What I read, and we will talk next week more about it. I really like to sharpen the idea to understand that this here is a very limited box, and we live in it 24 hours. And this is just like a little sibling of this. Still has an app, desktop in the pocket. And because we grew up with these things, but maybe you remember when you first learned how to write a keyboard, it was pretty difficult. But then over time you get comfortable with it, and now you don't even think about it anymore. So you have totally internalized that this is the way that you operate a computer. And because this perspective is so internalized, you don't even realize that you actually have a problem to break out of it because it becomes the world that you live in.
Yes.
And I think that's the interesting piece with the metaverse that we have to achieve in the class, is to get you outside of this box and for you to see the world what a computer can be from outside of that industry. So in 10 years with the work here and then in the lab, we really went very deep, and we understood that actually there needs to be a new operation system running the metaverse. Everything that's out there right now is still a derivative of some sort of desktop. And what we realized, Reality Editor actually was the idea of building an operation system. And we figured out how to do spatial multitasking, and figured out how to create a new concept of shared applications. So now we have this platform, and I wish there would be another company out there that would take that on and really have support and have that. Because so everything that we can do in this class right now, we use Unity and so on, we work on the content layer. I said this as a joke before, we can only put like images on a wall and have it all walk around in 3D and have the concept of a computer game. You have a person that walks around, that does things, just like any game that you can explore. But in order to get the value out of the metaverse, to have that big business that like a Gartner would estimate that the metaverse is, you can't achieve that on the content layer. If you go into something like Decentraland right now, and you try to find the most exciting value in there, what will happen is that somebody will say, oh, you should come into my Discord and figure out how you can get into my coin offering or something. So that's the kind of world that is possible right now. But in order for this metaverse to really take off, we have to get into a deeper layer. We have to go into the application layer. We have to understand a new concept of what an application actually is, because currently it's personal computing, literally. It's your personal application that you open up. It belongs to you. Nobody else can see what is on your screen, and the only thing that you can share is content through that application. So what we do in our lab, we have actually moved the networking into the application layer. So for us, the application itself is navigable object. And then that brings a lot of complications into the operation system that can actually handle that. So, I mean, we're kind of hacking a browser inside out and stuff. Like, I'm 100% know that our solution isn't the way that the metaverse will run, but it's a glimpse into the direction where these concepts should go. So, I'll talk a little bit more next week about that. We're very interested to go from, so in augmented reality for pretty much the last 20 years at this point, everything was focused around objects. You would superimpose information onto an object. But 2-3 years ago, 4 years ago, that shifted into space, into bigger scale. Now we can talk about architecture scale. Now we can talk about how do humans actually interact with augmented reality is in the guidance system, collaborative spaces, shared application. Like it opens up so much, and that's a fundamental shift in that industry, and that's a big part of what will drive the metaverse. We'll talk about spatial context, which is probably from my perspective the key to understand what the value is. Like on the left side, you see how this robot is programmed. It's a 2D interface. It's even worse than a 2D. It's just text. You type into the right mode, and then you have some buttons to go up, down, left, right, click on the right joint, and so on. And you need to train to operate a robot quite a long time, because the physicality of the object robot is so far abstracted away that you have to understand an abstract model in your mind in order to command the right commands into that interface. And that is really the horrible thing that happens with the desktop computer. It abstracts the world away from us, and we have to kind of think how what we see on the screen somehow relates to the real world. And wow, at the moment you can bring the spatial context back into your computation, in your interface, you can just put a point in space and say, oh, what, drive from here to there, and it will operate and does that. And a child can operate that. So that's a very powerful concept. But I think the most exciting thing about the metaverse from our perspective is this is really a new form of collaboration, a new form of presence, the ability to solve extremely complicated spatial problems remote. Just fly in from your couch, go into a remote space, be there with workers, with people that try to solve something in space, and have a collaboration that even can be better than being there in the real world. Like you will see the camera goes in a second into a bird's eye perspective. The ceiling is as high as in here. So it's a perspective you like literally can't take. Even if you would go onto a ladder, you wouldn't look down. But this kind of experience allows you to take new perspectives and dive into the matter of the physical world in a complete different way. So what you see here is there were some version of this original reality editor idea. So we have this spatial programming functionality that allows you to program industrial machineries we actually started with Legos. We started with Mindstorms, the program Mindstorms like that. And had a collaboration with Lego there. So that's my last slide. I'm pretty excited for this class, and I really hope in the end we're not ending up with just building another 3D room with some NFTs on the wall. I really hope. I mean, we have fantastic TAs who can really deep dive into the length and feeds of technologies that will drive the metaverse, and fantastic speakers who will take you out of your comfort zone and the perspective that you might have right now, because that's what it's about.
Yeah, thank you, Valentin. And Hiroshi will be back in a minute. I think it's time for a quick break. Let's take it 5 minutes or so, around quarter past, maybe we can come back and I'll start. And then when you come back, any questions you guys have, we can. Okay. So maybe we can do part two. Hopefully the people on Zoom will hear something. Look, I don't know if we can tweak it very much anymore, but the audio is with that, so we should get some time. So I'm going to give you guys a quick talk. Actually, it was going to go a little longer, but there's little time, so I'm going to zoom as fast as I go. Let's see where we end. The first part's going to be kind of motivational. We're going to talk a little bit about and kind of where the field is going, maybe, or the exciting things that are happening. You're going to hear a lot of that today. You have already. And then I'll start talking about kind of how we came to this as something. So start with my grandparents. That's at their house in Somerville, up at Somerville Hospital. I'm a local guy. I'm a townie. I grew up here. My grandparents both came from Italy, pretty much at the turn of the last century. And you know, Harvard immigrants, they built their life and kind of lived the American dream. That's a whole other topic to see how that's evolved. But it's incredible if you think about what they saw. When they were kids, when they were young, they would see people get around like this, right? Horse and buggy. But they lived very comfortably into the moon landings. As a matter of fact, I watched the moon landings, I believe, with them. So just think of a generation that went from getting around with a horse, for Christ's sake, to riding buggies on the moon. Incredible what they saw. The advance in technology, even in physics, right? We had the quantum revolution, relativity. Before that, we thought we solved all of physics with James Clerk Maxwell electromagnetism. People actually believe that around the time they were born, a little bit before. In quantum mechanics, relativity, things don't add up. Whole other layer of understanding that revolutionized how we look at the universe. Astrophysics too. What are galaxies? We didn't even know what they were until you had people like Hubble looking at them and finding stars in them and stuff like that. These really are the collection of stars. We're tiny in the universe. That's during their lifetime that revolution happened. So that's incredible. How about me? I think I feel impoverished by comparison, really, until maybe now. This is me as a kid, my first interaction with a computer. That was my dad worked at MITRE, so I had a chance to go with him to different places. He was a photographer, so he'd always go and photograph or film different kinds of technology and installations that were going on with the military industrial complex around here. And as you hear about Lincoln Lab, that's where a lot of this work actually happened. So this is an IBM 7030 computer, took a whole building, much infinitely less power than my watch. But this was a building full of stuff, people working with avidly. I had light pens I was working with, they were working with and let me play with them. All of this early interaction, but the computer kept breaking as well. So they'd be like the ran for an hour, just incredible. And here I am 2 years ago with the Magic Leap, trying it out here when some company came to pitch it with us. I've got more computing power on my waist, infinitely more than that, never mind just this watch. So we're just living in a world where computation, at least during my generation, has expanded. But again, this is just writing programs, doing stuff, and it's been a change. The web is a change. Not as revolutionary as going from horse and buggy to the moon, in my opinion, or from electromagnetism to quantum mechanics and relativity. Huge game changers. I think we're on the verge of one again. And that's what you're going to see. So you're going to get the answers to lots of great questions. It's one of my big questions, something I hope I live long enough to get a feeling for. Are we alone in the universe, right? This is one of the big questions of all of humanity. We're in a stone's throw of answering that, right? Because we're going to start looking for life elsewhere. I don't think we are, because I think the universe is this big, it's massive, just to give us a chance to be here. I don't believe with Mr. Liu here, although I love his novels. So I don't think the universe is full of life, especially life that wants to snuff us out. We have our own problems here. But still, it's a fundamental question. A question reflects on us as much as it reflects on physics and science. So we're going to know soon, right? So we're running missions now, really within the next years. Some of them are already out there, but more are coming. We're going to start actually looking in detail for life in the icy moons of Jupiter, or calling down those events with snake robots and things. And also looking in more detail on Mars, probably more for fossilized life, looking at atmospheres of exosolar planets. And of course, the technology we're talking about here, we're going to be bringing people close to all of this in a way that's unprecedented. But this is the big revolution. Man, a lot of us are gobsmacked. AI was, Rush and I remember, all of our life was a really hard problem. We kept thinking it was going to be solved. This is Norbert Wiener, one of MIT's legends. It's a photograph my dad had of mine. Already in 1949, thinking machine was going to replace man. Everyone thought AI is around the corner. At every revolution, there's always more opportunity generated for people. It's certainly a big change, but we haven't had robust AI at all. When I was a kid in the 80s, right, young man in the 80s, we thought AI was going to be huge. All these companies around here were AI companies, list-based, so on and so forth, rule-based. It didn't really work that way. It solved some problems, but it wasn't a groundswell. Of course, we grew up with Marvin Minsky here at the lab. We always believed it was happening. And he's right. It's happening now. ChatGPT. It's incredible. You've all had experiences with it. It's old news now. Maybe it starts to get boring. Not quite boring for me, and just wait for GPT-4. I mean, natural language is a solved problem. One of the hardest things in computer science, it's solved. Just incredible. And look at a transformer model. It's just by word substitution. That's how they train them, more or less, complete the sentence. What's the missing word? It generalizes beyond what you train it and starts being able to learn and do other things. That's incredible. Is really word substitution and games like that fundamental to intelligence? It's a great question. You don't know. It surprised everybody that things like this could do more than what they trained them to do. This is me just doing a singularity probe. When I first got, months ago, ChatGPT, I tried to say, how do you make yourself smarter? How do you make yourself more intelligent? It didn't want to answer the question. I love the guardrails they put on. We're all trying to break. It's a human thing, I guess. But yeah, this is just an incredible advance. My daughter is doing her homework now using, I introduced my kids to this, I probably shouldn't have. And they told me, my 18-year-old boy, I used it for my stats homework. I said, no, you didn't ask it to solve the problem. Actually, it was helping her one night. I did ask ChatGPT to solve one of the problems. It gave me the number, and the number was right. I couldn't believe it. But she said the math can simplify things. It does very well. Maybe then it's a partner for people to learn. But this is a game changer. But what about this? What Horace and I remember, right? We were real enthusiasts about computer graphics and art. Both of us kind of grew up loving this stuff. It looked like this in the 70s. This is a piece by Ken Knowlton. I knew him actually way back in the day. A lot of us in the U.S. knew these guys that pioneered old computer art. I love this stuff. It's beautiful. But, okay, it lived in its space. This is what we got now. And only the last year or two. Generative AI art is just incredible. And you do it through text, again, through a chat interface. You just call these worlds into existence. So I'm co-editing a special issue about pervasive computing on pervasive computing, Internet of Things in space. And they asked me about cover image. I said, okay, let's try to do it with Midjourney. So I just asked it, I put in the call for papers basically, and then it started showing me things like this. It's just incredible. So this is all about sensors measuring astronaut well-being and health, whatever, right? So you see kind of the organs. This is about Internet of Things. It's all computer gear somehow grafted onto the suit with internet cables. Yeah, it's not what a human would do, but there's something compelling about it. Asking more about VR, some sort of VR construct, who knows? This was going to be the cover. We all loved it, right? And it's astronauts working on lunar habitat with Internet of Things device. Simple problem. It gave me this. It's incredible. Astronauts having a hackathon with a bottle of wine. It looks like a coffee cup on the moon. Totally surreal, but it's something compelling about it. Azure really chickened out. They're conservative. They said, oh, we're afraid we might get sued, blah, blah, we don't know how generative art's going to work. They're wins. And of course, Computing Edge, the sister magazine, Computing Society, look at this month's issue, it has a generative AI, I'm sure, image on the cover. I hit them back with it, maybe this gets the cover after all this. But this is a dynamic thing. I did this on Midjourney 2 months ago. And then I went back a few weeks later, maybe a month later, I want a higher resolution image. So I just said, make it higher resolution. It's a button in the journey you can do that. Just upscale the image. I think you're just gonna upscale. No, it did this. It's because it's latent space, it's learning space, it's changing. It's always ingesting new information, new data. It's evolving. This is not nearly as good. I mean, this looks like kind of frightening. Who knows? So yeah, it's a dynamic picture. This is where you're learning how to deal with these things. This is how I made the cover everyone enjoyed for the class, right? I just asked them to show me the metaverse. So you can see he likes to play with text. God knows where he finds these things. It's probably from a science fiction book. Who knows? It's combining different things. There's something about this image caught all of us, right? People just couldn't even, well, good. It's amazing what people dream up, but in a few seconds, that's where it came out. The metaverse, the class type gave me these things. They're also intriguing. It's one we use all for the class. But yeah, it's just incredible that we do this. Then I tried to ask where the metaverse meets the Internet of Things. They gave me this weird hybrid cyber cat. Where did it come up with that from? I don't know. It's just intriguing. And of course, more connecting everybody in world. I kept going, right? You keep going with prompts, and these are all great. This one was magical. This became one of our contenders. And you know me, I push it. People in the South were earners Bosch with the metaverse scared internet. I figured let's just go for it. I can't do anything as simple as Bosch and metaverse, but maybe there's a weird link. And it couldn't quite do it. There's something compelling about it. It's like a Mac laptop and a Bosch painting with God knows what it is. So it's mind blowing. And then finally, when I gave the keynote for virtual reality hackathon, I gave it a picture of me and said, imagine this person giving the keynote at the hackathon. I kind of did. Here I'm part of the board collective. And I think, what the hell, a metaverse class at the Media Lab. It knows this room. That's kind of what this is. So, yeah. Anyway, revolutions in AI are changing everything. Just talking about these things. And VR and metaverse is a real matter of speaking worlds into existence. The latest season of Westworld really kind of explored that in science fiction. But people are working on that actively. Jean Larnier is looking for students actively to work with him on this, together with one of our alums here that are working with him. But also John Randolph will talk about this too. So this is on the verge, taking GPT, taking these DALL-E and generative AI, Midjourney frameworks, and bringing them into generating new worlds. How far is this rabbit hole going to go? This is the question. AI has always been fits and starts. Really, it's clear where the horizon is. It just doesn't go far. The system's great. The whole rule-based AI, multi-level AI, modular AI, they never went very far because they were just too brittle, right? But you start emulating something like the brain, even 2% of the human brain, which is pretty much what these cores are. If you look at synapses and affected neurons or something like that. Oh geez, they still went much further. What are the roadblocks? It's why I tried to ask ChatGPT, didn't want to answer. What are the reasons? I want more data. I want more data was part of it. I don't think it's all of it, right? So where's it going to stop? And where are the next roadblocks? That's a big question in the field. And I think that we're running a faculty search at Media Lab pretty much about AI interfacing with people. And I think this is a big thing for us. How does it interface with people in different ways? We tend to think about precognitive. So before you even realize something, you've got this information helping, right? Other people work with text and conversations. And I think of AI as an extension of self. This is tremendous role for the lab. And we're living in a world where creativity, sentience, concepts that really were almost holy. And if you talk about it in a computer science context, you could get slammed, right? I mean, creativity was always pretty low. Sentience, forget that. You even mention it. Now we can start to test some of these ideas. It's incredible. And of course, you're going to have revolutions in many other fields. I think your generation is going to see the transformation of the human because of all these things coming together. And yeah, we're going to have virtual extensions, self-assembled from the digital to try this with even our Hiroshi is very much working in that space now. It's been banded around, and I'm fortunate that the students picked me to be their poster child. At least Pat P. Some of you know Cyber Joe. Wait, here. Cyber Joe talks. Is this working?
Just the volume on.
Join all.
I have to join the audio. What is the audio on this or is the?
No, you don't need to join the, yeah, it should work, just,
Or it could be playing from your laptop.
he's not
It's like
on,
on my laptop.
he is connected directly to, he's not on Zoom,
Is it cranking?
he's just
Is
sending
that-
it to Zoom.
Is that up?
It was before, just play, is the audio on the right, on the video on?
Let's just figure this out. I'm sorry, but it's on Crestron.
Yeah.
It is up, oh, it's muted.
It's because that thing is off.
It was on.
Oh my God.
No, I turned it on.
Okay.
Just hit the, make sure your video, go back to the video, Joe. Hit the audio on the right, on the right of the video. Just make sure.
Oh, this, yeah,
Just
yeah,
make sure.
yeah,
It is on. Okay, well, play it again.
Well, we're supposed to just listen to the speakers.
So I heard stop before.
It did work, it did work before.
Yeah, I don't know what changed.
Maybe it's wrong with the video.
You could just quickly switch to your laptop to broadcast it on the laptop.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'll just have you guys, how many people know Cyber Drill? Not many of you, a lot of people do. So, yeah, let's hear him talk. Let's just go with my laptop and I'll crank it. Okay. No need for all of this one.
Hello, my name is Cyber Joe. I am an artificial intelligence mentor that helps and supports MIT Media Lab students in 2050. My original application, Professor Joseph Paradiso, was chosen to become an AI because he loves progressive rock music and is also a big fan of science fiction. Also, more than
There you go.
half of the students at the Media Lab wanted him on their thesis committee. My goal is to help students think about the unimaginable and ethical future. As my colleague Hiroshi always said, we need to think about the impact of our work for the next 200 years.
Anyway, it's on the web if you guys like this thing. It was scripted. Pat mined my images from talks I gave, so he was able to already do that. He really, went out of his way to make it look kind of digital. But these days, as Pat and Patty and the others teach in their face class, you can just go very, very far with it. So yeah, these things will be there. We'll be there after we're gone. It's going to be something. Is it us? Deeper question. So yeah, talking again about me personally, I've always been doing sensors all my life. Science fair at Southern Junior High, used to be in Union Square, where I went to junior high, building the sensors project. Beginning of the last space, the middle of the last space age, actually. And I love music. It's a passion of mine. And some of those, and you know. And I did my PhD in hydrogen physics here, so science has always been close to this. That's why at the lab meeting at MIT, the connection can happen to all of this. But I like to build synthesizers. And this is my homemade one design modular synthesizer at the MIT Museum, ran for 3 months in 2012. And it's a self-generating, generative music machine. I'm not playing it. It's just doing this. The patches are kind of a connectionist network when I think about it. That just have this complicated behavior. So the sounds just kind of go in the hall and it goes on there. This is my basement now. I've got a studio there where it has a home and it lives and it's getting even bigger. This is a piece I did for the Ops and the Radar and the Media Labs about a year ago. It was last term, beginning of the fall. So again, lots of layers of sound changing, coming in and out. And I work as a sculptor. I just build this process with batch boards. It just runs and does this. And people, it streams on the net, and cases like this, and people just listen for hours, they go to sleep with it. It's just always kind of living in this space. Now, why do I have all this gear? It's a good question. If people make fun of people like synthesizers, this is a great video, kind of Keith Emerson parody, all this stuff. A few reasons I think. They're awesome. Just, have a little keyboard or computer, that's not awesome. If you got this big wall of stuff doing things, it's something of performance. And, we knew about that already in the 70s when people would actually tour, like Keith would disappear. Skell Schultz, another one of my heroes. Unfortunately, we lost all these people. But, I saw him actually play with, not the modular, but lots of sense. Maybe bring this thing around. Another one famous in those days. I paid €9 for this. Apache's an old idea. It goes back to 1880, the telephone system, right? Before they had automatic switching systems, that they used. But modules never go obsolete. If I have a digital set or anything that runs Docker within a software system, it's gonna be obsolete when the operating system revs out of whack of the app. These things, 1 volt per octave, it's got a logic gate trigger, audio output line level. I can use things from an old boat together with things like this brand new Eurorack thing that came from EU. So it's incredible. I mean, you can still use this stuff. It doesn't go obsolete. And I don't have to excuse myself for having a big synthesizer anymore because Eurorack and these things are so popular that it's just a rage and these a whole floor of NAND that these conventions dedicated. Why? I think it's because the world is not this. This is the alternative, more or less, that you have in the computer. It gets to what she talks about. There's pixels on the screen. If I want to embed myself in something deeply creative, like a music process, the kinds of patches I make, this is not going to feel the same. It doesn't. I've done it. It's different. But can we keep the richness of this interaction without the clutter? Right? The physical world, that's the problem with tangible stuff. It just gets messy. And yeah, we'd like to not be in this world. And I'm close to it with my synthesizer. This might be a solution. And there are a bunch of, I gave a talk at Berkeley College of Music about this many years ago. So this is an old one, but there are others now too, where you basically start to tag and drag and patch in these virtual environments and physically connect things together. So this is a people have gone further, but now, does something happen? You got this thing in your hand, you kind of feel it, you don't feel the cord, you don't feel the knob, you don't have the physical presence of this. But can you start to extract this? And this is a piece of work from Patty's group that totally enamored me. It's a exoskeleton you wear in your wrist. So here someone's being tracked and they want a knob there. And yet in the virtual world they have the knob. Now the knob comes up and they can feel it. And it gets cluttered too. I mean, how many knobs can you have? You can change the behavior knob, can become a switch. You gotta have this thing. But something's intriguing about that. Have the physical world be what physical where it matters. Have the digital world generalize it. Play with the strings of both. Now getting to presence. I love shows. I go to concerts all the time. This is before quarantine, the Roundhouse in London. I went to a concert, one of my favorite bands there. I had to give a Cloak at Imperial College, and I had to do it just before this band played, so I could go to the show. But yeah, being around people, being in the midst of all of this is something special. Look, I have a good stereo system at home, so I can do virtual concerts during quarantine. I did, right? I've got a nice big TV. I've got even better speakers now. It sounds better probably than that seat I had in the Roundhouse, but I haven't kept around it. But it's not the same. To be in this crest of people, everybody's relating to this. There's something different about that. And how can you capture that? It's one of the big questions. During quarantine, this is what we had. This is one of the first Zooms I had as a group meeting. Nobody has had, right? It took us a while to get used to it. And it's even a paranoia, because look at Ariel. She's smiling. What else really is? And then, of course, they're getting used to Zoom. But when I'm giving a talk, when I first started doing it in Zoom, I don't know if you had the same experience. You see regular expressions, you think they're not happy. There's the smiley faces that are on Saber, right, where they're not live, bias you. So if you're not smiling like this, you just have this weird feeling. So you have to really adapt to this. It's not natural. Roshi talked about it. I mean, all of us feel that way. It's great to have it, but it's not what it wants to be. So yeah, what's the essence of being somewhere? How can you expand experience by connecting the sensors that are all over? We've written about this for a while. This cover article of Scientific American, we talked about this whole idea. Again, the Media Lab, connecting virtually has been a big thing. This is the photo, the picture of the wearable pioneers that we saw before. Many other instantiations was a big deal to walk around with a display of data information was from other places, basically. So we always pushed on it. This is the students of mine who did all the work you're going to see. I only have like 10 minutes, so I'm going to zoom to a good part of it. But yeah, this is the cohort that did at least the bulk of the work. And we like to look at this different scales. But yeah, going way back to start it, I came from a workshop in Nokia in Finland where we talked about really how to leverage mobile phones in crazy ways. And I thought this is already in the early 2000s. And I thought, let's just bring the sensor data up in this mobile device to really extend your sense of perception into the sensor. So I started playing with flash animation, first on PCs. This is actually an old video, this simple set of icons that are dynamic, it sensors all over the lab. This is a 4 shot of the Media Lab. This is from like 2003, I think, that we did it. So you're seeing light levels, you're seeing power consumption, you're seeing people moving, all kinds of other things are measured by the sensors. And then we did on a mobile device, right? The tricorder is the ultimate mobile device that knows everything about your environment. I think the mistake Star Trek made, the hard part about it, is to have the sensors all in the tricorder. In the world that I was entering in then, in the beginning of 2000s, the sensors are everywhere more and more. Have the device be a situated display for this data. So it brings it all in and it shows it. It doesn't have to have all the sensors in it. It connects to them. We're living in that world now. Back then, this was a weird idea. So yeah, I bought some toys, we could buy the real one, doesn't exist. But we built one into a Nokia 770 Linux phone, basically. So Josh Lifton said, we didn't even have an IU or accelerometer in there, or gyro. We had to put them on ourselves. So you could know where it is to the radio. We had radio location, rough idea where it is. We know how it's oriented. And then we would build our display but make it situated. And how many people know the first Star Trek? It's amazing. So this is how the tricorder works. So yeah, just seeing all this stuff around them on this device. Of course, they're not really looking at it. So it's point with it, kind of, although he's looking. So here they're going. Of course, he finds the alien. So we didn't have an alien, we had Josh, and he was the student that built our tricorder. Here it is. So it would move, right? So we had accelerometers, gyros, compass on it. You could scale it in and out and zoom for more detail, and you could walk around and you could see things happen. So here's somebody moving a chair. We had a smart power strip that would just limit around all this data. This is the mid 2000s, around 2005. Things are moving. You can see the accelerometer, even more power, so on and so forth. And then we made this thing called Ubiquarter. Could do more things. The whole idea is you're a ubiquitous computing utility worker of the future. This is around 2007, 8 that we did this work. You physically go somewhere, see something happening, see all the sensors go off and start scripting your rule base. That was before AI could do these kinds of things. And we built this. But then we figured, let's go to Second Life. This is the MIT in Second Life. It was one. It looked like that, right? We'll hear more about Second Life in another lecture. We built a whole rendered area of our third floor lab at that time, right behind Roshi's lab back then, in Second Life. And it was animated. So these are all the power strips that we had, looking at the amount of current that you draw, that's the amount of smoke you have you draw more current. If there's motion, they wave more intensely. Sound level is this thing around there. And yeah, you have your avatar, you go in and visit them and experience the real world through Second Life, a shared virtual environment. You can go there with your friends if you wanted, move around. And we had some simple interaction. This ball, there's speakers on the switches on the power strip, so you could actually break into the real world and talk. And this ball was some way to communicate with Josh and develop. So we have a lot of representation in virtual worlds of things in the real world, way to compress and compact them into an animation, bring it to life. And then we built these things all over the Media Lab called portals. I don't know, that's probably even before your time. Matt Leibowitz' PhD. You had lots of sensors that display, and they had another, and there was a Second Life. So here you could go to one of the portals that are all together in a space in the virtual world, see the past at different levels. You have these different images here, see sensor data up and down, which are these trails they made, and see live video if you want, and you can communicate both ways. So I'll skip a little bit about it. And we had sensors. There were 50 of them all over the Media Lab. Cameras,
3-megapixel video camera.
microphones. People didn't like cameras everywhere here back then. Now they don't care as much. Back then, big issue. You had to have forums for the Media Lab about how we deal with the data.
A touchscreen display. The screen to begin interaction.
So I think when you move, I mean, it's a crazy project. There's Matt.
Once a badge detected, the scanning stops. The
Which they would talk to badges.
display to the user. User can then interact with the portal through this touchscreen display. The portal is across reality.
And that's the Second Life point.
Second Life.
So you can go anywhere you want on the lab just by floating in front of the display.
Here we see a section representing a portal in Second Life. The different virtual screens display images from the portal going back in time. Visualizations of sensor data are built into the world of Second Life. Here we see a bar graph representing activity over time. And here we see a representation of the person's activity at the portal. Avatars can access live video from the nodes within Second Life by interacting with the virtual representation. Also initiate conversations through the portals. Permissions required on a real estate.
So that's before you could talk on your phone,
Starting the conversation.
with video.
The conversation now becomes a two-way connection, and both the real and virtual worlds are now linked. Ubiquitous awareness portals.
So again, whole idea of the real and virtual linking through these metaphors, where you can compress the data from the real world, so you can just experience it out of the sense of scale and time, you know, to really play with those things. We blew that open in this project. Some of you might know it, the Doppel Lab. We moved to Unity. We used sensors all over the building, moved to this building. So we had our sensors, we had sensors also that were built into the building that we had access to, just from building systems. And we brought it up into a really vivid animation that we could run anywhere. I used to go to give talks all over the world when I visit the virtual media lab. So if you could look into this world, this is the HVAC system with the flame. If it's hot, it's red. If it's cool, it's blue. If it's humid in the atrium, and sensors all on wires, some of them still out there. It's blue if it's dry, it's red if it's hot. You can see people moving around. This is a animation from then. We ran it for many years. So this is the building out of its regulating point. The blue circles mean it's cold. The orange ones mean it's too hot. So in the atrium, you can fly through and you can see the values. And what people call digital twin. We didn't have a word for it then. This is a 2008, 9. We were doing this one. People have IDs so they can move. They move by our RFID reader. You see their image appear. We have microphones all over. If you moved in the virtual world near where microphone was in the physical world, you could hear out of it. And here you hear people talking. But we distorted it so you can't understand what they say. So we reverse trains, we mix them, then you get the acting. So you see people excited, someone started laughing, and so on. Play with time, fast, slow, so on and so on. But then we moved to doing this on the planet. So we started the Titmarsh project, so you know about that. Lorena Davenport, one of our colleagues here at the lab, of the cranberry bog that was being restored into a natural wetland. So put sensors all over to document that process, developed our own sensors, but critically thought about how to bring that information up to people in new ways. So we built our own sensor, it measures lots of things, it's adaptable, as Brian made this work. Whole talk about this. We built hundreds of them. We put well over 100 up there in different environments, lots of sensors in the ground, it's a wetland. And then we had audio, we had microphones all over the place. So we captured audio from large parts of the property too, with multiple microphones. So what can we do with the audio? We can start to identify low bird sounds. This is just classification by machine learning already from what 6-7 years ago. You can see the separating out species. You can see in real time this is birds, winds, cicadas. In the evening, you get the peepers and the insects, and then during the day, different birds come out. You can see different species of birds. This is before you had to do birds. It's all exciting to do. But we did it with this property that had these microphones built in. We have a website. You can go there and see live video. You could look at sensor data, listen to the audio in different parts of the place. Cover all that in different ways. We have probably a well-known nature webcam, one of the best known ones around here anyway, where we have all kinds of YouTube sensations, especially this heron. But heck, let's bring it into the virtual world, because we had the whole place scanned. We had the experience from doing Doppel Lab. Let's do Doppel Marsh, make an analog avatar environment of this wetland and have the sensor data animated in different ways. And in this case, since I love music, let's not just do it visually or just have raw sound come in. Let's also build music out of the data. So the sensor data can be mapped to music according to different composers. We did about, I think, 3 pieces with different composers that would do different mappings. And you can select it on the thing. I can actually run it now. It's late and it's dark over there. It's not really, this still works. So this is a video Doppel Marsh. This is in Unity again. Every time the sensor updates, you hear that ping and you see the bubble. You see the the value over the thing on the view. Listen, if it rains, more custom does this now, if it rains, it rains, if it snows, it snows, right? So it has a parallel world. This is a different visual layer that Don had put together for our student work a lot on it at the end. And the audio is spatialized. As you get near the different notes, the timbre and the pitch comes from the temperature and humidity and the other data that's not in the sense. If you listen to it now, it's very different from this. This is a piece that Evans Foreign professor at MIT did with one of my students. Again, very spatial, really tied to the city of the note and varying a lot of the sensory. So it's a whole different way to experience the landscape. And then Don thought about animals. What if you could play with the animals and have the appearance of the animal reflect the history of the sensory data? So if it was really dry, they'd have a bad hair day. At first the animals looked normal, but then he started playing with these bizarre representations, much more effective. So here he's changing different parameters, seeing the animal change in different ways. And then you can look into the rear way, cameras all over. In the virtual world, look back into the real world. He called it augmented cross virtuality. So